Hello, everyone. This is Michael. I am an English teacher. I am from the United States, and I started teaching English in 2010. So I have been teaching English for 8 years now. I began my teaching career in South Korea. I spent 3 years working at an elementary school in South Korea, and for the past 5 years, I have been here where I am now in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, where I've been working at a private language center, mainly working with adults. I still sometimes teach children, but I mostly teach adults now. So I started teaching children at an elementary school in Korea, and I am now here in Dubai, working with adults for the most part. Now, for today's lesson, I wanted to focus on some homographs. Homographs can help us with pronunciation and also help us with some vocabulary. So let's look at a few sentences. Here's our first sentence. I'll read the first one for you. We drove down a windy road on a windy day. What did you notice about that sentence? I'll read it again. We drove down a windy road on a windy day. That word, W-I-N-D-Y. We can pronounce that in two ways. And it will have two different meanings based on how we pronounce it. So, the first meaning in the sentence, windy road. What does windy mean? Well, there are a lot of curves and turns. It goes back and forth, round and round. Imagine that you are driving along the seacoast near the ocean. A lot of times it curves back and forth as you're driving. Or perhaps when you're driving up or down a mountain and the road might become very windy. So we drove down a windy road on a windy. Do we know windy? Think about the weather, the wind. It's very windy outside. We drove down a windy road on a windy day. So we have to be a bit careful. If I just show you the word W-I-N-D-Y alone, I say, look at this word. What does it mean? How do you pronounce it? Well, that would be hard to say. But when you see it in a sentence, it's easier to determine. So look at how it's being used in a sentence. We drove down a windy road. That's an adjective. On a windy day, also an adjective. So we have to see how it's being used to understand how to pronounce it. So let's look at one more sentence. Now this sentence will be similar to the previous sentence in that it's using a past form of the verb wind. In our last sentence, we saw the word windy, which is an adjective. The verb is wind. And the past of wind is wound. It's also the third form as well. It's the past participle. So you have wind, wound, wound. So keep that in mind. And now let's look at the next sentence. He ignored all the precautions and wound up with a severe wound. There's a lot of vocabulary in that one. And there's a phrasal verb as well. You see this? Wound up. The past of the phrasal verb, wind up, which means a final result. If you're not careful, you will wind up with a serious injury. So let's read this sentence again. He ignored all the precautions and wound up with a severe wound. What does wound mean? W-O-U-N-D, wound. It's an injury. It's usually a serious injury. There's usually blood, a deep cut. It's not something just small. It's something big. So perhaps you cut your hand very badly. You have a wound on your hand. So the sentence one more time. He ignored all the precautions and wound up with a severe wound. The final result was a very severe injury. So we looked at two sentences today. Now there are many more just like this, many more words that have different pronunciations and different meanings depending how they're used. Remember, you need to see it in a sentence. If I just show you the word W-I-N-D, could be wind, could be wind. W-I-N-D-Y, could be windy, could be windy. W-O-U-N-D, could be wound, could be wound. It's depending how it's used. So you really need to see a sentence to understand how it's pronounced. So that's all for today. I hope that you learned something in vocabulary. I hope you learned something in pronunciation. I hope you had fun. So I wish you luck in your English endeavors. Good luck with the learning. Thank you everybody for your time. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Michael. I'm from the United States. It's been a pleasure. Goodbye and take care.